The night she told him to stop chasing her, she didn't know he had already stopped, because 5 minutes earlier, he'd found the divorce papers she secretly filed to steal half his company. Daniel Ortiz stood in the doorway of his own bedroom, the papers trembling slightly in his hand as Melissa brushed past him like he wasn't even there. She didn't notice the envelope. She didn't notice his expression. She didn't notice that the man she was trying to control had just discovered the moment she planned to cut him out of his own life. She only noticed her reflection in the mirror. Melissa tossed her hair over one shoulder and said, "Why are you staring at me like that? What now?" In the same tone she used when talking to store clerks or waiters she thought were beneath her. She didn't stop applying lip gloss. Didn't look at him long enough to read the betrayal in his eyes. Daniel tried to steady his breathing, but the blow hit hard, harder than he expected. He'd always known their marriage was strained, but he never imagined she was capable of forging his signature and preparing to gut him financially behind his back. When he didn't respond, she put the cap back on her gloss, walked toward him, and planted one hand on her hip like she was rehearsing a breakup scene in front of an audience. "Listen," she said, voice cold and controlled. "From now on, I decide when we talk or spend time together. You need to stop chasing me. It's pathetic." Daniel didn't speak. Not because he agreed, but because if he opened his mouth, he might break. Not from weakness. From disbelief that the woman he once held during storms, the woman he built a future with, could look him in the eye while actively planning to destroy him. Melissa interpreted his silence as obedience. She smirked, tapped his chest lightly with one manicured finger as if dismissing an employee, and grabbed her handbag. "Good. Glad we're finally on the same page." The front door slammed a moment later. Daniel sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the divorce papers again. She wasn't just leaving him. She wanted half of everything he'd built. The house, the retirement, the company that took him 15 years, 3 failed contracts, 3 trucks, and the last pieces of his youth to build. And she filed behind his back. Months ago, there were text messages attached, subtle clues from conversations with someone saved under the contact name Coach. He didn't need to dig far. The trainer at the gym, the one she posted workout selfies with, the one she laughed with a little too loudly, the one she claimed was just helping her get in shape. Daniel wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions, but the forged signature on the credit line, the shady transfers, the divorce packets sent to the wrong address. This wasn't an affair of the heart. This was an affair of opportunity. He walked down the hallway in a daze. The house looked different now, too clean, too staged, too curated for guests he didn't invite. Her shoes were lined up perfectly, color-coded. The candles were lavender for calm energy. The expensive throw blanket was placed precisely at a diagonal angle she insisted on. A house designed to impress people who didn't live there. Not a home built for 2 people who loved each other. Daniel sat at the kitchen island, the divorce packet open beside him. His coffee had gone cold. The refrigerator hum filled the silence. His chest tightened as he remembered the early years, cheap takeout, late-night drives, planning the future on notepads and napkins. Back then, Melissa held his hand and told him she believed in him more than he believed in himself. When did that woman disappear? And when did this new one, this calculating, cruel stranger, take her place? His phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. "Running late. Don't wait up. Girls' night kiss mark." He stared at the text, at the lips emoji she used to send him after long workdays. Now she used it for alibis. He set the phone down slowly. Something inside him shifted. Not anger, not grief. Something colder. Something razor-sharp. Something awake. He picked up the forged bank form again, tracing the fake signature. His handwriting, not his hand. He opened his laptop and began searching the bank's fraud department. Then the county court portal. Then property records. Then corporate filings. Every click peeled back another layer of deception. Credit line. Transfers to Primecore Wellness and Training LLC. A lease application for a luxury apartment, with her employer listed as his company. She wasn't planning to leave him. She was planning to replace him. Daniel stood and went to his office, pulling open drawers he hadn't touched in years. Old receipts, financial statements, tax returns. His mind raced faster than his hands could work. He felt stupid, naive, but not destroyed. Not anymore. When he reached the bottom of the drawer, he found their unsigned prenup. The one she cried over, insisting they didn't need it because love means trust. He had believed her, believed the tears, believed the sincerity. Now he saw it for what it was, a performance, a long game, a setup. His chest tightened again, but not from pain, from a rising, quiet determination. He whispered into the empty room, "No more chasing." Then he grabbed the divorce papers, the forged documents, and his car keys. He knew exactly who to call next. And he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Melissa thought she was 10 steps ahead. She had no idea he had just stepped onto the board. By the time Melissa told her friends she was about to cash out of a boring marriage, Daniel had already placed the first piece of his nuclear revenge on the board, and she didn't even know the game had started. 2 days after discovering the forged signature, Daniel sat alone in his truck in a quiet strip mall parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Rain hammered the windshield, wipers fighting to keep up. His phone buzzed nonstop, notifications from the bank, from his accountant, from automated alerts he never set up. Each message was a new confirmation that Melissa hadn't slipped or made a mistake. She had been planning this for months, maybe longer. He closed his eyes, and the memory that haunted him most surfaced again. Melissa laughing with her trainer at the gym, her hand brushing his arm in a way she hadn't touched Daniel in years. The laughter wasn't guilty or hidden. It was proud, flaunting, like a woman who believed she'd already secured her future and no longer needed to pretend. Daniel finally exhaled, wiped his face with both hands, and stepped out of the truck. He walked toward the dimly lit cafe at the corner of the lot. Inside, the smell of espresso and old wood met him. So did the sight of Claire Bennett, his old business school rival turned corporate and divorce attorney, already seated at a back booth with her laptop open, reading the documents he'd emailed her the night before. She looked up at him with sharp, assessing eyes, the kind that dissected problems before the owner of the problem even spoke. "You look worse than the paperwork," she said quietly. "And the paperwork looks like a crime scene." Daniel slid into the seat opposite her. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and started again, explaining everything. The coldness, the emotional distance, the manipulative control, the secret credit line, the forged signature. Claire didn't interrupt. She only nodded, typing notes, occasionally narrowing her eyes as he described details that pointed to intent, not impulsiveness. When he finally finished, he slumped back, exhausted. "So, what do I do?" Claire closed her laptop halfway and leaned in. "You do nothing," she said. "At least not yet." Daniel blinked. "Nothing? She thinks she's smarter than you. She thinks you're weak. She thinks you'll react emotionally. Confront her. Give her a chance to hide evidence or move money around even faster." Claire tapped the forged signature with a pen. "You reacting is her greatest advantage. So you are not going to react." Daniel swallowed hard. "So what am I going to do?" "You're going to get ahead of her before she even realizes the race started." She pulled out a blank legal pad and wrote one sentence in bold letters at the top. Phase 1. Protect Daniel from Melissa's fallout. Then she broke it down step by step, her handwriting precise, sharp, and terrifyingly strategic. Transfer personal assets into a revocable trust, completely legal before any separation filing. Restructure business ownership, placing majority shares into a protected shell corporation. Document every instance of fraud, including IP logs, timestamps, account activity, and forged signature analysis. Pull financial statements from the past 12 months, before Melissa started funneling money to her trainer. Create a digital trail of transparency, showing Daniel did everything above board. The more she wrote, the more Daniel saw something he hadn't felt in days. Control. He wasn't helpless. He wasn't cornered. He wasn't going to be destroyed by the woman he loved. Claire paused halfway through her list. You need to understand something, she said, meeting his eyes. If she files first, she has the narrative. But if she files first thinking you're stupid, we have the advantage. Because the judge will see who was planning the hit and who was just preparing the shield. Daniel nodded slowly. The numbness in his chest began changing, hardening into resolve. When do we start? He asked. We already did, Claire replied. I filed the trust paperwork an hour ago. The scene shifted. Daniel in Claire's office the next morning, signing trust documents under her supervision. Everything clean, time-stamped, notarized. Daniel meeting with his accountant under the pretense of a routine audit, giving Claire access to financial records without tipping off Melissa. Daniel calling customer service at the bank to request logs of the credit line activity, using a calm, polite tone that masked the turmoil inside him. Daniel printing the documents, placing each piece of evidence into color-coded folders Claire prepared. Fraud, business, assets, transfers, marriage. Every click, every signature, every notarized stamp was a quiet chess move, and Melissa had no idea any of it was happening. Back at home, she was in the living room with her friends, laughing, swirling a glass of wine, saying things like, I'm done babysitting him. I deserve a partner who worships me. Once this is over, I'll finally get the life I want. Her friends exchanged uneasy glances. Even they felt something was off. But Melissa brushed them off like lint, sipping her Chardonnay and scrolling through apartments on her phone. That night, when Melissa climbed into bed smelling like expensive lotion and someone else's cologne, Daniel said nothing. When she turned her back on him and fell asleep, he stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of every year he had given her. When her phone buzzed with a message from Coach, and she smiled into the darkness before drifting off again, Daniel turned his face toward the window and let the cold night air settle him. Silence, once painful, now felt like strategy. He wasn't chasing anymore. He was planning. And Melissa, arrogant, smug, convinced she had already won, was walking right into the trap she built for him. Only now he was holding the blueprint. Melissa walked into the courtroom smiling, because she still believed she was about to walk out owning half of Daniel's company. She didn't know the judge already had evidence that would erase every dollar she tried to steal. The automatic doors shut behind her with a soft thud, sealing her fate long before she realized it. She strutted through the hallway in a white blazer, hair curled, nails perfectly done, carrying an expensive purse Daniel unknowingly funded. At her side was her gym trainer, dressed in a too-tight shirt, looking around like a tourist in a museum. Melissa squeezed his hand and whispered, By this afternoon, everything changes. Daniel stood at the opposite end of the hall, alone except for Claire. He wasn't dressed like a man going to war. He was dressed like a man attending a quiet meeting. Navy suit, muted tie, calm face. But his eyes were steady in a way Melissa hadn't seen in years. She mistook it for defeat. She mistook everything for more than she was worth. When she approached, she didn't greet him. She didn't acknowledge the 15 years of marriage. She only smirked and said, Try not to embarrass yourself in there. Claire lifted one eyebrow, subtle but scathing. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The courtroom doors opened. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, echoing off polished wood. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, looked up briefly as the parties entered. Papers shuffled. Counsel settled in. The bailiff announced the case. Melissa crossed her legs, adjusting her blazer confidently, her lawyer straightening his tie as if preparing for a performance. Daniel sat across from her, hands folded. Not nervous, not angry, just ready. The judge began. Mrs. Ortiz, you are requesting 50% of marital business assets, the marital home, and indefinite spousal support. Is that correct? Melissa nodded with theatrical sadness. Yes, Your Honor. I sacrificed my career to support Daniel's dreams. I was emotionally abandoned. I just want what's fair. Daniel kept his face neutral, but Claire's fingers tapped the table once. Signal that everything was going exactly as expected. Melissa's attorney launched into a well-rehearsed monologue. How Melissa stood by Daniel. How she managed the home. How her emotional suffering justified sweeping financial support. He painted her like a saint trapped in a loveless marriage with a work-obsessed husband. Melissa dabbed her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. Then it was Claire's turn. She rose slowly, smoothing her suit jacket, and approached the podium with quiet command. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She simply began unfolding the truth like a surgeon exposing a wound. "Your Honor," she said, "before we address division of assets, we need to discuss a matter that significantly impacts the court's ability to determine fairness." A ripple of tension moved through the room. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Claire lifted a set of documents. "These are bank records showing a credit line opened under Mr. Ortiz's business. The signature authorizing the loan states Daniel Ortiz. However," she clicked a small remote. A screen behind the judge lit up. Side-by-side images appeared. Daniel's real signature, and the forged one Melissa had carelessly scribbled. Claire's voice remained calm. "A handwriting expert has confirmed the signature was not Mr. Ortiz's. Furthermore, the IP address used to submit this application belongs to Mrs. Ortiz's device." Melissa's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Irrelevant to the divorce." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. Fraud is absolutely relevant." Daniel didn't look at Melissa, but everyone else did. Claire continued, unbothered by the interruption. "Your Honor, the money from this fraudulent credit line was transferred to Primecore Wellness and Training LLC. Another click. Another slide. A business registration form with the trainer's name. A wave of whispers moved across the courtroom. The trainer sank lower in his seat, his face draining of all color. Melissa's lips parted slightly. Shock flickered, then panic, then rage. Claire pressed forward. "Here are the account statements showing the transfers. Here are photos of luxury purchases made with that money. Here are the travel receipts. And here," she clicked again, "are screenshots from social media, posted by Mr. Ortiz's wife and the owner of Primecore, confirming trips and events paid with those funds." The judge leaned forward, brows raised. "Mrs. Ortiz, do you wish to explain this?" Melissa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but she shook her head, too stunned to form a lie fast enough. Claire made her final move. "Given this evidence of financial misconduct, fraudulent activity, and dissipation of marital assets, Mr. Ortiz's restructuring of his business, done legally, transparently, and prior to any filing, was a reasonable protective action." She placed one last document on the podium. "Mr. Ortiz's business trust is valid. Therefore, Mrs. Ortiz is not entitled to any portion of the company." That was the knife. The twist came next. "Additionally," Claire said, "because Mrs. Ortiz used marital funds to support an extramarital affair, we request that she receive no alimony, no claim to the marital home, and full financial responsibility for the fraudulent debts she created." The trainer stood up abruptly and slipped out the side door like a guilty shadow. Melissa watched him leave, hand trembling, eyes filling. Not with sorrow but with fear. The judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Ortiz, based on the evidence presented, I am finding you at fault. The court will issue a written order awarding the home to Mr. Ortiz, denying your alimony request, and assigning restitution for the misused business funds to you alone." Melissa gasped. Her lawyer slumped. Daniel remained silent. The judge added one final line that punched even harder than Claire's evidence. "Mrs. Ortiz, this divorce is no longer about fairness. It is about accountability." Melissa's world collapsed in a single sentence. And Daniel, calm, steady, 10 steps ahead, had never looked stronger. Melissa didn't lose Daniel in court. She lost him the moment she reached for his hand afterward, and he stepped back like her touch no longer had permission. The rain outside the courthouse had turned into a cold, steady curtain by the time the final gavel fell. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, low and angry, like the world itself disapproved of what Melissa had done. She stumbled out the doors, mascara streaking, her white blazer soaked, her heels slipping on the wet pavement. She spun around, searching for the trainer who'd come in with her that morning. He was gone. He'd vanished the moment the evidence hit the courtroom screens. She whispered his name into the damp air, voice trembling. No answer. Just the sound of passing cars and her own unraveling breath. Then she saw Daniel. He exited the courthouse calmly, umbrella overhead, Claire beside him holding a binder of documents, the evidence that had dismantled Melissa's world. He walked down the stone steps with quiet composure, the kind he had earned through months of battle she didn't even know she was fighting. Melissa ran toward him, almost slipping. "Daniel, wait!" He paused at the bottom of the steps. He didn't step toward her. He didn't soften. He just waited, cold rain pattering against the edges of his umbrella. She stopped in front of him, drenched, shaking, eyes captured by fear rather than love. "Daniel, I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can fix this. You don't have to ruin me." Claire took half a step forward, ready to intervene, but Daniel gently held up a hand. He wanted to hear this, not because he cared anymore, but because closure demands truth. Melissa tried again, voice cracking. "We were just having problems. I made mistakes. But you know me, Daniel. You know I never wanted to hurt you." He looked at her. The woman he once adored, the woman who laughed with him in cheap apartments, the woman he held during every disappointment. He waited for the familiar ache in his chest. It didn't come. Just silence. Quiet. Final. "You said you'd decide when we talked," he said softly. A line without anger. A line without venom. Just truth. She blinked, confused. "Daniel, please." "Today," he said, stepping away from her reach. "I decide we don't." Melissa froze. The rain hammered harder, plastering her hair to her cheeks. The moment cracked something inside her, something she believed would never break. He walked past her, not looking back. Claire followed, her heels clicking sharply against the wet stone, leaving Melissa alone under a darkening sky that finally reflected the reality she created. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel's life began to breathe again. His house, once a showroom for Melissa's vanity, started to look like a home. He removed the oversized mirror she insisted they needed for aesthetic symmetry and replaced it with a framed photo of his first delivery truck. He unboxed his old vinyl records and played music on quiet evenings instead of listening to Melissa criticize his taste. He repainted the living room himself, soft gray, calm, peaceful. A color Melissa said was too boring when he first suggested it. Now it felt right, grounded, rooted. The air shifted. The silence stopped feeling lonely. It began feeling like freedom. At work, his employees noticed the change. His shoulders were no longer hunched. His voice carried differently. Rachel, his operations manager, was the first to say it gently. "You look lighter, Daniel. Like you finally exhaled." He didn't deny it, because it was true. The company thrived. Without Melissa draining funds, his financial stability grew faster than ever. Contracts he'd been stressing over fell into place. His warehouse crew surprised him with a cake on the day the company hit a major milestone. He hadn't realized how much space Melissa occupied in his mind. Space she filled with stress, silence, and expectations he could never meet. Now that space belonged to him again, to his future, to peace. Melissa's world, meanwhile, kept collapsing. The fraudulent debts, now legally hers, mounted faster than she could manage. The credit line she thought would fund her new life became a financial chokehold. Her friends stopped asking her out. The trainer blocked her number. The luxury apartment denied her application after the court ruling. She moved into a cramped duplex with peeling paint and a leaking sink. Every night, she scrolled through Daniel's company page, seeing announcements of his success, the photos of him smiling with employees, and the occasional picture where Rachel stood near him. Close, but respectfully distant. That quiet closeness stabbed deeper than any courtroom loss. Months later, on a chilly evening, Daniel invited Rachel for coffee on his back patio. They wrapped their hands around warm mugs, sitting in easy silence. No pressure, no rush, just comfort. Rachel finally asked, "Do you ever think about forgiving her?" Daniel took a long breath. I forgive her enough to let her go, he said, but not enough to let her back in. Rachel smiled softly. That's real forgiveness. He nodded, finally understanding that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means reclaiming yourself. Then he glanced out toward the dimming sky and added, half to himself, half to her. What do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed or walked away too? The question wasn't just for Rachel. It was a quiet, natural invitation for anyone listening, for anyone who had ever loved the wrong person too long. Rachel answered after a moment. I would have walked. Loving someone shouldn't cost you your dignity. Daniel smiled, the small, honest kind he hadn't shown in years. He wasn't celebrating a victory. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't rushing into anything new. He was simply at peace. And for the first time in a very long time, peace felt like a triumph greater than revenge.